They laughed at her, in public, out loud. A man with a badge and 26 years and a room full of witnesses, and he laughed. She didn't leave. That was her first mistake, according to him. 60 minutes. That's how long she stood there while he dismantled everything she said, piece by piece, in front of strangers who watched and said nothing. 60 minutes of being called a liar without the word ever being used. The skirsk of lie. The polite kind. He was so sure he had won. He had no idea what was walking through those doors. Simone Carter was not the kind of woman who made scenes. She had spent 24 years being the opposite of a scene. Quiet in the hallways at work. Steady in the break room when things got loud. The one who nodded when she disagreed and smiled when she wanted to say something sharp. Her co-workers at the hospital called her composed. Her mother called it something else. Controlled, Delia would say. Not the same thing. But that was a conversation for another day. Right now, Simone was standing in the athletic wear section of a sporting goods store at Eastfield Mall in Charlotte, North Carolina, holding a pair of compression shorts up to the light like she was reading a patient chart. The bag was already in her other hand, the one with the logo on the side, a small patch her mother had pressed onto the canvas years ago, the kind of thing that meant nothing to most people and everything to the right ones. She had not put the bag down once since she walked in. She did not know yet why that would matter. Renee stood 2 feet away, arms crossed, watching her with the expression of someone who had been waiting too long and was deciding how much longer she was willing to wait. "Those are the same ones you put down 5 minutes ago," Renee said. "They might be different." "They are not different, Simone. The stitching looks different." Renee made a sound, not quite a sigh. Not quite a groan. Something in between that said, "I love you, and also I will leave you here." Simone put the shorts back. She moved down the aisle, hands trailing along the edge of the shelf, reading labels with the focused attention of someone who had learned, growing up, that her mother's requests were specific for reasons that did not always get explained, but were always real. Delia Carter did not buy gear casually. She had a list, exact brands, exact weights, the kind of specificity that came from 26 years of knowing that the wrong material in the wrong situation could be the difference between functioning and failing. Simone knew this. She also knew the store did not carry what was on the list on the main floor, which meant she needed to ask someone. She found a young employee near the end of the aisle, early 20s. Name tag that said Wayday. He looked like he would rather be anywhere else, but he looked up when she approached, and that was enough. "Hey," Simone said, "I'm looking for something specific. It's for my mom. She's in special forces, so the standard training gear doesn't really hold up for what she does. I need something with reinforced paneling, moisture control, the kind of compression that's actually built for extended wear." Wade nodded slowly, processing. "We have a few options in the back. Some of the technical stuff doesn't make it to the floor." He started to turn. That is when it happened. The laugh. It came from the left. Sharp. Short. Loud enough to cut through the soft hum of the store's background music without effort. Not a chuckle. Not the warm kind of laugh that invites you in. The other kind. The kind meant to land on someone. The kind designed to make a person smaller before they have a chance to respond. Simone turned. The man standing near a rack of hoodies was not in uniform. Jeans. A Carolina Panthers t-shirt, faded at the collar. A badge clipped to his belt the way some men carry a watch. Not because they need to check the time, but because they want you to know they could. He was in his early 50s, broad across the shoulders, with the ease of someone who had spent decades being the tallest authority in every room he entered. He was looking at Simone. "Special forces," he said. The way a person says something they find genuinely funny, head tilting, bottom lip pulling, like the words themselves were the joke. "Your mom." Simone did not respond. He kept going. "I've been in law enforcement going on 26 years, he said. "I've worked alongside military, done joint operations, training programs, the whole thing, and I can tell you right now, special forces is not something you just." He gestured. Loose, wide, like he was clearing fog. "It's not a job description you throw around at a mall." Simone looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back at Wade. "So do you have anything in the back?" she said. Wade glanced at the man, then at Simone. Yeah, I can check." "Great. Thank you." Wade disappeared. The man took a single step closer, not aggressive. They say someone moves when they feel they have not yet been taken seriously enough. "I'm not trying to be rude," he said, which Simone had learned at approximately age 14, was almost always what people said directly before they were rude. "I'm sure your mom works hard," he continued. "I'm sure she does something. But special forces is a very specific thing. That's years of selection. Failure rates, most people can't fathom. And no offense, but you're doing a lot of talking," Renee said, from 2 feet behind Simone's left shoulder. For someone who wasn't part of this conversation, the man looked at her. Renee looked back. She had a face she made when deciding whether a situation was worth her full energy. It was the face she was making right now. The man smiled, patient. The smile of someone who had spent decades deciding when things were worth engaging with and when they weren't. "I'm Officer Dale Pruitt," he said, "Charlotte PD. 26 years. I've met a lot of soldiers, people who've been through selection. I know what that world looks like, and I know what their families sound like. And this." He gestured towards Simone in a way that was not technically about her appearance, but was absolutely about her appearance. "This doesn't quite add up." Simone stood very still. There was something her mother did when things got hard. An internal inventory, shoulders, jaw, hands. Check each one, relax each one. Stay in your body, and do not let the outside noise pull you out of it. Shoulders, fine, jaw, tight. She let it go, hands, clenched at her sides. She opened them. "My mother's name is Delia Carter," Simone said. Calm, even. Like she was giving a patient history. "She's been serving for 26 years. She came home 5 months ago, and she's going back today. She has to pick something up before the ceremony this afternoon. That's what I'm doing here." Pruitt tilted his head. The patience on his face shifted, just slightly, to something that looked like pity. "Look, sweetheart." That word. Simone felt something move through her chest. Not heat, exactly. Something quieter than heat, older. "Don't," she said. He paused. "Don't call me that." Pruitt raised his hands. A small surrender that was not a surrender. "All right, fair enough." He dropped them. "All I'm saying is I've heard this before. Adults who want to feel proud of their parents. People who hear something about what their family member does. And the story grows in the telling. It happens. It's not a character flaw. But it happens. I'm not exaggerating. I'm sure you believe that." There it was. The quiet devastation of that sentence. Not calling her a liar, not technically. Just suggesting that what she believed and what was true might occupy different rooms. And doing it in front of people who had drifted close enough to hear. The woman with the clearance basket near the sock display. The couple by the shoe wall who had stopped talking to each other. 2 men near the register who were no longer pretending to look at water bottles. An audience. Simone had not asked for an audience. And here was the problem. The one her mother had been very clear about. The one Delia had pressed into her hands like a warning every time she left, the same way she pressed her contact number into Simone's phone before every long absence. Never give details. Not to strangers. Not in public. Not ever. Delia's work did not exist in databases civilians could search. It did not exist in the kind of record Pruitt was implicitly demanding. Which meant Simone could tell him everything she knew. The unit, the years, the specifics she had gathered in pieces over 24 years of being Delia Carter's daughter. And he would still find a way to say it was not enough. Or she could say nothing and let him keep standing there. There was no version of this that cost her nothing. That was the thing no one told you about moments like this. Sometimes every door out of the room takes something from you. Sometimes you are standing in a sporting goods store at 11 in the morning and the only question left is which thing you are willing to lose. She did not look away from Pruitt. She also did not respond. The silence was invitation enough. "Tell you what," Pruitt said, the ease of a man who had been filling silences for 26 years. "If your mom is really out there, really in special forces, really the whole thing, you bring her here. Have her walk in. I'll be the first to shake her hand." He smiled, generous, forgiving, like he was offering something. But until then, maybe we call it what it is, a story. And there's nothing wrong with a good story. A few people in the drifted crowd looked at each other. Someone almost laughed. Almost. Renee stepped forward. "Simone, I know, I know." Simone did not move, because leaving felt like agreement, like confirmation, like walking out of the building with his version of events still standing unchallenged in the middle of the floor, and everyone who had been watching would carry that version home tonight and set it down at their dinner tables, and it would just stay there as a fact, as the thing that happened at Eastfield Mall today. She looked at Pruitt. She said quietly, "You'll see." He blinked. He had not expected that. He covered it fast. The blink, the flash of something, gone in under a second, replaced by the tolerant smile. "Sure," he said. "Maybe so." But the smile came back smaller than it had left. Simone turned back toward the counter, where Wade had disappeared. Waited, bag in her other hand, doing the inventory, shoulders, jaw, hands. She was fine. Behind her, Pruitt said something to one of the men near the register, low, casual, the tone of someone narrating their own victory to a nearby stranger. She caught the word imagine and the word kids, and then she stopped listening, because listening was going to cost her something she could not spend right now. Renee came to stand beside her. Said nothing. That was the thing about Renee. 25 years old, sharp as a cut, fully capable of filling every room she entered. But sometimes she just stood beside you, and sometimes that was the whole thing. Wade came back with a box, set it on the counter. "These are the technical compression base layers, reinforced stitching, moisture wicking, the build you're describing." He hesitated, glanced behind Simone, then back. "This what you need." Simone picked up the box, checked the specs on the side. "Yes," she said. "This is right." She pulled out her card. From across the aisle, Pruitt's voice again. Louder now, performing for the people who were still watching. "You know what they say. You can tell a lot about someone by the stories they choose to tell, especially the ones that can't be verified." A woman near the sock display made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite agreement, but not disagreement either. The sound of someone choosing comfort over involvement. Simone swiped her card, took the bag from Wade, turned around. Pruitt was watching her. That same steady expression. Badge on his belt. 26 years of practice standing exactly like that. She met his eyes. "Thank you," she said to Wade, without looking away from Pruitt. Then she walked past him. Past the hoodies. Past the jerseys. Past the small cluster of people who moved aside because something in her posture made moving aside feel like the natural response. Renee fell in step beside her. They made it to the end of the aisle. "He's still watching," Renee said. Low. "Just between them. I know." "Simone, I know. What do you want to do?" Simone stopped walking. She stood still for a moment, both bags now in the same hand, the fluorescent lights above doing nothing to help, the store going on around them like nothing had happened. A kid asking his dad about basketball shoes, 3 aisles over. A woman comparing 2 pairs of leggings near the exit, the world not pausing for any of this. What did she want to do? She wanted to call her mother. "Come. Just come. Walk in here and let them all see what a lie this is." Every single person who heard that man and let it land without question. But her mother was preparing for a ceremony across town, putting on the uniform that she had earned in ways Simone could not describe. Because Delia did not talk about her work. Because Delia had made Simone promise, early and clearly and more than once, that the details stayed private. Not because she was ashamed. The opposite, because some things are too real to perform for strangers. So Simone could not call her, and she could not prove what she knew, and she could not make a single person in this store believe her without doing either of those things. She turned back around, walked back to the sneaker wall, stood there with her bags because something in her body refused to exit the building, while the story Pruitt had constructed was still the only one standing. Renee stood beside her again. "Okay," Renee said. "Okay, we're doing this. We're doing this. I need you to know." Renee said, "that I am fully on your side and also that I wore the wrong shoes for whatever this is." Simone almost smiled. Not quite, but close. Around them, people had settled back into shopping. The brief dramas had dissolved the way things do in public spaces, fast and completely, absorbed to the hum of the place. Most of the people who had been watching had moved on. A few lingered, the way people do when they are still deciding whether something is their business or not. Pruitt had moved too, back toward the register area. Close enough that his presence was still a thing in the room, but loose enough to look incidental. The practiced positioning of a man who knew how to stay somewhere without appearing to stay. He was not finished. Simone knew that. She was not finished either. She stood with her bags and her straight back and her inventory running on a loop, and she waited for whatever came next. The minutes moved, strange and slow, and each one exactly the same length. And then, in the far corner of the store, near the small cafe counter, a man set down his paper coffee cup. He had been there since before Simone arrived. She had registered him peripherally when she walked in, the way you register furniture or weather. An older man, navy jacket, baseball cap pulled low. The stillness of someone who had learned a long time ago how to be present without drawing attention. Now he was looking at her. Not the way the others had looked. Not with curiosity or entertainment or the particular fascination of a bystander or watching something unfold. This was different, deliberate. The look of someone not deciding what to think, but recognizing something they already know. He looked at her face, then at the bag in her hand, at the logo on the side. He went still in a way he had not been still before. Not the stillness of inactivity, the stillness of decision. Simone noticed, filed it, and kept standing. Pruitt came back around 20 minutes later. He had a way of moving through the store that made everything look incidental. Just browsing, just passing through, just happening to be in the vicinity of the person he had spent the last 20 publicly questioning. He stopped near a display of sweatshirts, a few feet from Simone, and picked one up and looked at it with the focus of a man who had no interest whatsoever in the sweatshirt. "You're still here," he said. "I am," Simone said. "Waiting for something?" "Yes." He looked at her, the patience thinner now, worn at the edges like a performance that has been running too long. "You know," he said, "I've got a daughter, older than you. She used to get like this when she was a teenager, dug in, wouldn't move." A pause. "Even when she knew she was wrong." "That's not what's happening here," Simone said. "I know that's what it feels like." "That's not what's happening here," she said again. Same tone, same pace. The repetition deliberate. Renee made a quiet sound beside her. It's the sound of someone appreciating a particular kind of precision. Pruitt put down the sweatshirt, turned toward her more fully. Something different in his posture now, less ease, more pressure. He had been performing patience. Now he was applying weight. "Look, I've talked to a lot of people who believe things that turn out not to be true, and most of them believe it completely. That's what people don't understand. You can believe something entirely and still be wrong." "Yes," Simone said. "You can." He paused, heard the second meaning. His jaw moved. In the corner of her eye, she saw the man at the cafe counter set his cup down again, not to drink. His attention, which had been angled away, shifted back toward them. Pruitt said louder now, loud enough for the people who had drifted back into earshot. "Tell you what, if your mom walks in here in uniform, here today, I'll cover whatever you came in for. That's my offer." He gestured at the bags in her hand. "That's how certain I am." The crowd reformed, quiet, attentive, pretending not to be. Simone looked at the bags, looked at Pruitt. "She doesn't need your money," she said. "That's not really the point. Then what is?" "The point," he said, "is whether you're going to keep standing here waiting for something that's not coming." Silence. She felt Renee beside her, holding herself out back with visible effort. Felt the small weight of the room pressing in. The store, the lights, the badge, the 26 years, all of it arranged against a single person standing with 2 bags and a straight back and the absolute knowledge of something she could not prove. She looked at him and said, for the second time, the only thing she knew was completely true. You'll see. His smile stayed, but it took longer to come back that time. Across the store, the man in the baseball cap reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a phone, typed something, pressed send, put the phone away, picked up his coffee, went back to being still. Simone did not see this. She was in the middle of the floor, holding her bags and doing the inventory and waiting. Her jaw was loose. Her hands were open. Her shoulders were where they were supposed to be. She was not going anywhere, and somewhere across Charlotte, in a room where a woman was checking the position of her beret in a mirror with the automatic precision of someone who had done it 10,000 times before, a phone buzzed on a table. Delia Carter picked it up, read the message, read it again, set the phone down, and picked up her keys. The thing about a crowd is that it has a memory. Not a long one, not a careful one, but a memory nonetheless. The kind that forms fast and settles hard, the way concrete does. Soft for a moment, then fixed. And what the crowd at Eastfield Sporting Goods had fixed on, in the 30 minutes since Pruitt's voice had first cut through the store's ambient noise, was a particular shape of events. A woman made a claim. A man questioned it. The woman was still standing there. The man was still standing there. Nothing had been resolved. That was the shape. That was what the crowd carried. Not the specifics of what had been said, or the texture of Pruitt's voice when he used the word sweetheart, or the way Simone's hands had opened and closed at her sides during the parts that were hardest to stand through. Just the unresolved shape of it. A question without an answer. A challenge still open. Simone understood this. She had worked in hospitals long enough to know how fast a narrative forms around a situation, how the first version of a story becomes the default, how correcting it later costs 3 times what it would have cost to get it right in the first place. She understood it completely. She also could not stop it, so she stood near the sneaker wall with both bags in her hand and her back straight and the inventory running. Shoulders, jaw, hands, and she did the only thing available to her, which was to stay in the room and not agree to the version of events that was currently winning. Renee had gone quiet in the specific way that meant she was thinking hard. Renee's silences were not passive. They were active, the kind of quiet that preceded either a very good idea or a very direct statement, sometimes both at the same time. "Someone's recording," Renee said, low, "just for Simone. I know. At least 2 people. I know. That's either going to help or make this worse. I know." Renee nodded. The nod of someone confirming they are on the same page, without needing to discuss what page that is. They were on the page that said, "This moment had already left the store." Whether either of them had chosen that or not. Garrison Sutton had not planned to film anything today. He had driven to Eastfield Mall to buy his wife running shoes. She had mentioned it 3 times in 2 weeks, and Gary had learned, after 11 years of marriage, that 3 mentions was the threshold between casual preference and actual expectation. He was here on domestic assignment, the kind with real consequences for non-compliance. He had been a local news reporter for 9 years. Charlotte beat, city council meetings, highway projects, the occasional human interest piece his editor liked because it moved online. He had spent 9 years developing the particular instinct of someone who makes a living recognizing when a room contains more than it appears to. This room contained more than it appeared to. He had pulled out his phone almost without deciding to. Pure reflex, 9 years of it. He kept it casual, held at the angle of a man checking messages, not documenting a public confrontation in a sporting goods store. He caught most of it. Pruitt's voice clear and carrying. The word's eyes know what that population looks like. The word sweetheart. Simone's response measured even. The kind of calm that costs a person something to maintain over time. The small gathered crowd. The badge catching the light on Pruitt's belt. Gary had looked at the footage for a moment. Then he typed a caption. "Officer laughs at black woman in Charlotte sporting goods store. She says her mother serves in special forces. He doesn't believe her." Posted it. Put his phone in his pocket. Went back to looking at running shoes. And waited. What happened next was fast. The way things move now. The way a match touches dry grass in August. 400 shares in the first 20 minutes. Then the number stopped being a number he could track individually and became a direction instead. Upward, fast, with a momentum that did not need his help to sustain itself. The comments blurred into a texture of recognition. Not all agreement, not all outrage, but an overwhelming sense of familiarity, of people watching something and seeing inside it a version of something they already knew. Gary felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Once, then again, then in a pattern that suggested his editor had seen the post. He did not check it yet. He was watching the store. Pruitt's phone buzzed. He looked at it the way a person looks at something they recognize, but were not prepared to see. A quick red. His posture shifted almost without his knowing, shoulders drawing back a fraction, chin lifting slightly, the automatic adjustments of a man recalibrating in real time. He put the phone back in his pocket, and he made a choice. The wrong one. He turned back towards Simone, and this time there was something different in how he moved. Less ease. More intention. He had been performing patience before. Now he was doing something else, performing certainty, reminding himself and the room that he had not been wrong yet. "I want to show you something," he said. Simone waited. He pulled out his phone, turned the screen toward her. He had pulled up a civilian-accessible military database, the kind of publicly maintained record that lists names and general branch information for service members. He had typed in Delia Carter. No results. "I'm not showing you this to embarrass you," he said, his voice slower now, more deliberate, positioned for the people nearby. "I'm showing you because this is what a search turns up. Nothing. No record. And I've done this before. When someone has family in service, there's usually something. A name. A unit, something accessible." Simone looked at the screen. She knew exactly why there was nothing. Delia had explained it once, the way she explained most things, directly, without cushioning, without leaving room for misinterpretation. Certain units do not appear in public-facing databases. Certain roles require that absence. The lack of a record is not evidence of no service. In some cases, it is evidence of the particular kind of service that cannot be on record. Simone knew this. She could not say it because saying it required explaining how she knew it, and explaining that required describing specific details about her mother's unit and operational role, which was the exact thing Delia had said, directly, clearly, more than once, never to do. So the empty search result sat on Pruitt's phone screen, and the people nearby looked at it. "That doesn't mean anything," Renee said. Pruitt glanced at her. "Patient. It means there's no public record. There are entire categories of military service with no public records. That's the point of those categories. That's also a very convenient explanation. Convenient because it's accurate," Renee said. "You're using the absence of information as if it's information. It's not. It's just absence." Pruitt smiled at her, the smile of a man who has decided he does not need to win the argument because he has already won the room. "Look," he said, to the air as much as to either of them. "I'm not the bad guy here. I'm asking questions. That's what I do. 26 years. You look at what the evidence says and you take that seriously. And when the evidence says," he gestured at the empty screen, "this, you take that seriously too." Someone near the register murmured something low. Agreement, or close enough to it. Simone felt it, the weight of that murmur, the way it distributed through the room and landed specifically on her. She kept her face still, shoulders, jaw, hands. "You'll see," she said, the third time now. But this time her voice came out smaller than she wanted, not broken, not cracking at the edges, just smaller. The way a voice gets when it has been carrying something for too long without being able to set it down. Pruitt heard it. She knew he heard it because she watched the change move across his face. Subtle, almost gentle, the expression of a man who mistakes endurance for surrender and responds to both the same way. "Hey," he said, softer now. "It's okay, I understand wanting to believe. Don't." Renee's voice, sharp. "Don't talk to her like that." He looked at Renee. "She's not confused," Renee said. "She's not a child. She knows what she knows. The fact that you can't find it in a phone search doesn't make her wrong. It makes your search incomplete." Pruitt held Renee's gaze for a moment. Then, with a patience that had something practiced about it. "And you know this how?" "Because I know her. Because I've heard her talk about her mother for years. Because the way she talks about her is not the way someone talks about a story they made up." "Renee." Simone's voice. Quiet. Renee stopped, looked at her. Simone shook her head. The small signal between them, not like this. The audience was looking for somewhere to put its attention, and they would find Renee's anger faster and more comfortably than anything else in the room. That was how these things worked. She had seen it at the hospital. The person who raises their voice becomes the story. The original thing gets buried under the reaction to it. Renee understood. She exhaled, stepped back one step, and the silences came back. It was in that silence that Roy Sellers stood up. He did it slowly, the careful economy of a man who had spent decades in places where unnecessary movement cost unnecessary energy, and had brought that habit home with him. He unfolded from the cafe stool with a deliberateness that had nothing weak about it. He left his coffee cup on the counter. He walked toward the group at a pace that said he was not in a hurry, because he did not need to be. He stopped at the edge of the gathered people, looked at Pruitt, said nothing for a moment. Pruitt noticed him, the quick catalog of a man who spends his professional life assessing people in doorways. "Can I help you?" "No," Roy said. His voice was low, the register of someone who had learned that volume is for people who are not sure they will be listened to. "I don't think so. But I think I can say something useful here." He looked at Simone. She looked back at him. There was something in his eyes she could not immediately name. Not pity, not curiosity. Something older than either. The look of someone who is not deciding what to think about a situation, but recognizing something they already know from somewhere else. "Sergeant Major Delia Carter," Roy said. Not a question. A statement delivered with the flatness of fact. "Fort Bragg. 3rd Special Forces Group." The room changed, not loudly, not dramatically. The specific shift in atmosphere that happens when a door opens that was closed before, and the air pressure adjusts to accommodate what comes through it. Simone stared at him. "I served with her," Roy said. 7 years. I finished my service in 2019. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his identification, not a business card, something more worn than that, handled often and kept carefully. He held it where Pruitt could see it. "Roy Sellers, retired. I know Delia Carter the same way I know my own hands." The silence in the room was complete. Pruitt looked at the card, at Roy, at the card. Then he said, with the patience of someone who is not ready to let go of a position but is aware that letting go with grace is an available option, "And you just happen to be here today." "I come here every Tuesday," Roy said. "The cafe makes a decent cup." He glanced at the coffee going cold on the counter. "I was sitting right over there the whole time." He looked at Pruitt without looking away. "And I'm going to tell you plainly. Everything this woman said is true. I know it because I know who her mother is. I know it because I know what that logo means." He nodded toward the bag in Simone's hand. "And I know it because I know what Delia Carter looks like when she's raising somebody right. She is standing here." Simone felt something release in her chest. Not everything, not the full weight of the last hour, but something, a specific small loosening, the way a room feels when someone opens a window. Renee made a sound beside her. Not a word, just an exhale that carried the weight of everything she had been holding back. Pruitt looked at Roy for a long moment, the assessment visible, the recalibration happening in real time. Then, "With respect, and I mean that you're a civilian now. One person's word, even a veteran's word, isn't the same as documentation." "I know it isn't," Roy said. "I'm not offering it as documentation. I'm offering it as testimony. There's a difference." He held Pruitt's gaze, patient, unhurried. "And I'm offering it because this woman has been standing here for the better part of an hour, and not one person in this room has said what they all should have said 30 minutes ago. So I'm saying it." The murmur near the register did not come this time. A different kind of quiet. Behind the long service counter at the back of the store, Wade Pruitt had not moved in several minutes. He had watched his father work the room the way he had watched his father work every room his entire life. The easy authority, the practiced calm, the voice that made disagreement feel unreasonable before the disagreement even finished forming. He had grown up inside that voice. He knew every register of it, the version it used at dinner, the version it used at his high school graduation, when his father stood up to give brief congratulatory remarks that ran 6 minutes and ended with a summary of his father's own career. He knew them all. He had never said that out loud. He watched Simone's standing in the middle of the store floor with her bags and her straight back, and the expression of someone who had been refusing to fold for an hour. He had been watching her longer than was probably appropriate for someone who was supposed to be working. He had a transaction to close at the end of the counter. He was not closing it. He was watching his father tell a woman who was telling the truth that she was wrong. And he was watching himself not do anything about it. Roy had walked over, and something in Wade's chest, something that had been sitting very still under the weight of 21 years of knowing which version of the room he was supposed to occupy, shifted. He reached into his apron pocket, pulled out his phone. His father had good peripheral vision. Wade had known this since he was 8 years old. But his father was focused on Roy now, and the counter was far enough back that the phone was below sightline if he kept his head down. He scrolled to a contact he had saved 2 years ago at a veterans outreach event his community college had co-hosted. He had talked for 40 minutes that evening to an older man who turned out to know his father professionally and had looked at Wade with the careful expression of someone choosing their words. Wade had asked for his number at the end of the night and had not been entirely sure why. He had a clearer sense of why now. He typed, "Your friend's daughter is in here. He's been going at her for almost an hour. She's holding up, but she shouldn't have to do it alone. Thought you'd want to know in case you can reach the mother." He sent it before he could talk himself out of it. Put the phone back in his apron, pressed his hands flat against the counter surface. They were shaking slightly. He kept them flat and waited. Roy had felt the message arrive in his jacket pocket approximately 4 minutes before he stood up. He had read it once, read it again. Then he had looked across the store at the young woman standing in the middle of the floor with the bags and the straight back, and the logo he recognized on the side of the bag, and understanding had settled into him the way it always did. Fast, complete, not requiring any additional processing. He had scrolled to a number he had not used in 8 months. Not because the relationship had gone anywhere, because the woman it belonged to called when she had something to say and did not require her phone touched when she didn't. That was Delia. Had always been Delia, he typed. Eastfield Mall. Sporting goods on the main floor. Simone is here. Come when you can. He sent it. Then he waited 7 minutes, finishing his coffee, watching the room develop into exactly what it was developing into, letting the situation become what it needed to become before he walked over. Because timing mattered. He had spent 25 years learning that timing was not the same as speed. When Pruitt said, "And you just happened to be here today," Roy looked at him and said yes without any of the defensiveness Pruitt had expected, and that absence of defensiveness did more than any argument would have. Pruitt had expected pushback. He had gotten plainness. And plainness, in Roy's experience, unsettled people more than any confrontation. "You know," Pruitt said, addressing Roy now with the tone he used for civilians who thought they understood law enforcement. "I appreciate your service. I mean that sincerely. But you've been out for, what, 5 years? 6? Things change. The landscape changes. And one man's memory of a colleague from years ago. It's not memory," Roy said. "It's knowledge. Memory is what you had for breakfast. Knowledge is what I'm telling you about Delia Carter." Pruitt's jaw tightened. Roy did not fill the pause. He was very good at not filling clear pauses. Brenda Holt had been managing Eastfield Sporting Goods for 4 years. She was good at it in the ways that mattered for retail. Inventory systems, staff scheduling, the particular diplomacy required to redirect an unhappy customer before they made their unhappiness everyone else's problem. She was organized. She was practical. She had not been trained for whatever was currently happening on her floor. She had been watching from the stockroom entrance for the last 15 minutes. Watching the crowd breathe in and out. Watching the man with the badge and the woman with the bags and the older man who had just said things that changed the temperature of the room in a direction she could not immediately categorize. Then her phone buzzed. A notification. Her store's location tagged in a social media post. She looked at it. Read the caption. Watched 23 seconds of footage in which Pruitt's voice was clearly audible, saying, "I know what that population looks like," and in the background, the store's logo was visible to anyone with functioning eyes. She looked at the number beneath the post. 14,000 shares. In under an hour. Brenda Holt was not a courageous woman in any cinematic sense of the word. She was a practical woman. And the practical fact of 14,000 shares with her store's name in the frame was a fact she understood immediately and without ambiguity. She straightened her name tag, walked out onto the floor, crossed to where Pruitt was standing. "Sir," the voice she used when redirection needed to happen without provocation. "I need you to lower your voice. This is my floor and I have other customers." Pruitt looked at her. "I'm not causing a disturbance," he said. "I understand that's not your intention," she said. "But I need the floor calm. That's what I need from everyone right now." He looked at the badge on his belt. She looked at it too. "Please," she said, the specific please that was not soft, the one that landed like the end of a sentence. Pruitt took a step back, not far, not in defeat, but back, and in that manufactured gap Simone breathed, just breathed. The first full breath she had taken in what felt like a long time. Renee put her hand on Simone's arm, did not say anything, just placed it there and kept it there. Simone looked at Roy. He was already looking back. "You okay?" he said. Quiet, just for her. She thought about the question instead of answering automatically. "Not yet," she said. "Getting there." He nodded, like that was the honest answer and therefore the right one. Then, lower. "I reached out. She's coming." Simone went still. "I have her number," Roy said. "We served together. I messaged her about 20 minutes ago." Something moved through Simone's chest. Complicated and large, and not yet nameable. Not relief exactly. Something older than relief. The specific feeling of having stood inside something hard for a long time and suddenly understanding, not that it was over, but that you had not been as alone in it as it felt. "She has a ceremony," Simone said. "I know." Roy looked at her. "She'll still come." Simone did not say anything else. She looked at the logo on the side of the bag in her hand, the small patch, the one that meant nothing to most people and everything to the right ones. She had held on to that bag the entire time. She realized it now, had not put it down. Not when Pruitt first laughed, not when the crowd formed, not when the empty search result appeared on his phone screen, not once. She had been holding it the entire time and had not known that was what she was doing. Holding on to something that belonged to her mother. Holding it in a room full of people who did not believe her mother existed the way she existed. The store moved around them. Brenda near the register, monitoring. Pruitt a few feet back, recalibrated but not gone. Wade behind the counter, both hands flat against the surface, not looking at the transaction he was supposed to be closing. Gary Sutton near the far wall, phone in his pocket now, watching with the attention of someone who is still documenting even when he is not recording. A woman who had been near the clearance rack for the entire hour finally put down the item she had been holding without buying it and looked at Simone directly, not unkindly, just directly, the look of someone deciding whether to say something. She did not say anything, but she did not look away either. Simone looked back at her, held it. 1 second, 2, then looked away herself, not because she was backing down, but because she had other things to do with her attention right now. Shoulders, jaw, hand. She was still here. That was the whole thing, right now. That was the only job. Stay in the room. Do not agree to the version of this that is wrong just because agreeing would make it stop. Pruitt circled back after Brenda had returned to her post. He was quieter now, less performance, which somehow made it harder to stand against. The performance had been something to push back on. This was different. This was the version of him that had been underneath the display the whole time, smaller and harder and more genuinely convinced, not performing certainty, actually certain. He stopped near Roy. "You served," he said. "Yes," Roy said. "What years?" "94 to 2019. Pruitt nodded, doing the math. "So you know the culture. You know how it works inside those units. It's better than most," Roy said. "Then you know," Pruitt said, "that families sometimes misunderstand what their people do. They hear something, they repeat it. The picture grows bigger than the reality. It doesn't happen out of malice. It happens because people love their families, and love makes things larger." Roy looked at him. "That's not what's happening here," Roy said. "You're certain. I'm certain." Pruitt turned the badge on his belt, the unconscious gesture of a man reaching for the thing that had always been enough to make him certain before. "One person's certainty is more than you've offered her," Roy said, "since you started talking." The sentence sat there, clean, complete. Pruitt had no immediate answer for it. And in the quiet that followed, from across the store, near the main entrance, the sliding glass doors opened. Not dramatically, the ordinary mechanical slide of automatic doors that had opened and closed 100 times since Simone walked in. But the footsteps that came through them were not ordinary. They had a quality, even, deliberate. One foot and then the next with a consistency that had nothing hurried about it, and nothing hesitant either. The rhythm of someone who had walked into many rooms and stopped worrying a long time ago about whether the room was ready. The crowd heard it before they saw anything. People turned, not all at once, in the same gradual way they had gathered. One person noticing, then the person beside them, then the next. A slow wave of attention turning toward the entrance. Simone heard it, she heard it, and something in her chest recognized the sound before her eyes had confirmed anything. The way the body knows things it learned before it had language for them. The specific weight and cadence of someone she had known her whole life walking toward her. She turned. Delia Carter walked through the store, full uniform. The kind that takes time to put on correctly and carries in its precise geometry 26 years of meaning that no database would ever contain. The insignia on her shoulder catching the overhead light, her beret under her arm, her face composed in the particular way of someone who assessed a room from the doorway and knows exactly what she walked into. Her eyes moved through the store, found Simone, and stayed. She walked straight across the floor. The crowd did not part dramatically. It just accommodated her. The way space rearranges itself around something with enough presence. People shifted without being asked, without looking at each other, without deciding to. They just moved. She stopped in front of her daughter, looked at her face, read it the way she had been reading it for 24 years. Taking in everything at once, the set of the jaw, and the weight in the shoulders, and the particular expression that meant held up but at a cost. "How long?" she said, not loud, just for Simone. Simone exhaled, the first real one in an hour. About an hour. Delia held her gaze for one more moment, the private language of it, the thing that passed between them that did not require words because it had been built long before either of them had vocabulary for it. Then she turned and looked at Dale Pruitt, and the room went completely still. The store did not go quiet all at once. It went quiet in pieces. First, the couple near the shoe wall, who had been whispering to each other since Roy stood up, stopped mid-sentence. Then the woman with the clearance basket set it down on a nearby shelf without looking at what she was setting it down on. Then the two men near the register, who had spent the better part of the last 30 minutes pretending to examine a display of water bottles, stopped pretending entirely. The music kept playing overhead. Something low and rhythmic that no one in the store had all been listening to for a while, but even that seemed to pull back, make room. Understand that what was happening on the floor right now was not something that needed a soundtrack. Delia Carter stood in the middle of Eastfield Sporting Goods in her full uniform and looked at Dale Pruitt. Pruitt looked back. He did not look away. Whatever else he was, whatever machinery of conviction and defensiveness and unexamined assumption had been running inside him for the last hour, he was not the kind of man who looked away from things. He met Delia's gaze and held it, and did the visible work of seeing what he was actually looking at. The insignia on her shoulder, the posture, the 26 years that were not in any public database, but were absolutely, undeniably present in this room. Simone watched his face move through something. It was not a clean movement. Not the satisfying collapse she might have imagined during the long minutes of standing alone on this floor. It was more complicated than that, more human, the specific expression of a person who has been certain about something for a long time and is now standing in front of evidence that the certainty was built on something thinner than they understood. He did not speak immediately. Neither did Delia. She was doing what Simone recognized as her mother's version of assessment. Not the internal inventory of shoulders and jaw and hands, but something broader and faster. A full read of the environment, the crowd, the positions of every person in the room, and what those positions told her about how the last hour had gone. She looked at Roy, still standing near the edge of the group. Roy gave a small nod. She looked at Renee, who looked back with an expression that carried everything she had not been permitted to say out loud for the last 60 minutes. She looked at Brenda near the register, at Gary Sutton near the far wall, at Wade behind the counter, at the bag in Simone's hand. Then back at Simone. One more moment, just between them. The language they had built over 24 years that did not require any words because it had been constructed long before. Either of them had the vocabulary for what it was. Then she turned to Pruitt. "What did you say to my daughter?" she said. Not a question, the grammar of a question without its uncertainty. The sentence structure of someone who already knows the shape of the answer and is extending the courtesy of letting the other person say it themselves. Pruitt's chin lifted slightly, an automatic response to the uniform, to the rank. Sergeant Major, a nod. The acknowledgement that came after 26 years of professional proximity to people who carried it. I want to be clear, I didn't intend any disrespect. Delia waited. Your daughter made some claims, he continued, about your service, your role specifically, and I questioned them. I've worked alongside Semleray for most of my career. The claims she was making didn't align with what I know about how that world operates, and I said so. What did you say to her? Not louder. Exactly the same volume. But the repetition landed differently. The way a second knock on a door is different from the first. More specific, more certain that the person inside has heard and is choosing what to do with the sound. Pruitt stopped. Started again from a different place. I told her I didn't believe her. In front of how many people? He glanced around the room. At the people who were still there and not pretending to be elsewhere. There were other customers present. How many people? He exhaled. Several. Delia looked at him for a moment. Just looked. The particular quality of that attention. The way it held someone in place without any physical force, without any raised voice, without anything except the full weight of a person who had spent 26 years learning exactly how much a gaze could carry, was something Simone had experienced exactly twice in her life, at close range. Both times it had lasted approximately 4 seconds. Both times it had been more than sufficient. 26 years, Delia said. Pruitt nodded. On the force, yes. And in 26 years, she said, with everything you have seen and learned about how people work and what they carry and what it costs them to tell the truth in a room full of strangers. You looked at my daughter and decided the most productive thing you could do was make her smaller. The room held its breath. Pruitt's jaw moved. That's not. I'm not asking you to agree with my characterization, Delia said. I'm describing what happened. You can have your interpretation of your intentions. But what happened? What she experienced, what every person in this store witnessed for the last hour, was a man with a badge and 26 years of professional authority spending that hour taking something from a young woman who had done nothing to deserve it. She paused. One beat. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice. Pruitt did not respond, and in that silence something shifted in the room. Not loudly, not with any drama attached to it. The specific shift that happens when the version of events that has been dominant for an hour meets a version that is more accurate, and people who have been living inside the first version begin the quiet work of adjusting. The woman with the clearance basket was looking at Simone. The two men near the water bottle display were looking at Simone. Even Brenda, near the register, had stopped monitoring the floor and was simply standing still and listening. Pruitt tried again. His voice was different now. Lower. The performance register gone. What was left sounded more genuine, which made it harder to dismiss and also harder to hear. I hear what you're saying, and I want you to know I'm not someone who goes looking for. I have a daughter. She's 27. I've spent my entire career trying to do right by people, by families. By people like who, Delia said. He stopped. People like who, she said again. Not aggressive, not a trap. Genuinely opening the space for him to hear the specific shape of the sentence he had been about to complete. Pruitt closed his mouth, then opened it, then closed it again. That small, repeated motion, the mechanics of Hamon trying to locate words that would not land the way he had just understood they would land, was more honest than anything he had said in the last hour. Simone watched it happen. The moment a person hears themselves about to say something and understands, before they say it, what it would reveal about what they actually believed was true. Delia let him stay in it. She did not fill the space, or guide him out of it, or make it easier in any direction. She stood in her uniform in the middle of Eastfield Sporting Goods and let the silence do what silences do when no one interrupts them. After a moment, Pruitt said, I was wrong. Just those 3 words. No architecture around them. No qualification. No, but I want you to understand, or there's context here you're not seeing. 3 words carrying their own weight without anything added to make them lighter. Delia nodded once. Saying it to me isn't enough, she said. Pruitt looked at her. She tilted her head towards Simone. It was in that turning, Pruitt beginning to turn towards Simone, his body starting the motion that his face had not yet committed to, that something caught. A small internal snag. A hesitation so brief it barely registered, as hesitation at all, less than a second of a man's eyes focusing on something they were trying to place. Delia saw it. Simone saw it. Roy, who had spent 25 years learning to read the signals that move through people's bodies faster than their words do, saw it from where he was standing. Fort Bragg, Delia said. The Joint Training Program, 2018. Pruitt looked at her. I ran that program, she said. 3rd row from the front, left side, aisle seat. You were there in the morning and gone by the 2nd hour. The room was completely still. Pruitt stared at her. I noticed because leaving early during a joint training program takes a specific kind of confidence, Delia said. The kind that comes from believing that whatever is being taught probably doesn't apply to you. She held his gaze. I didn't think I'd meet you like this, but I remember you. The silence that followed had a different quality than anything that had come before it. Not the silence of a crowd waiting to see what would happen. The silence of a room watching a man discover that the person he had spent an hour dismissing had, at some prior point, already encountered him and already formed a clear-eyed assessment. The asymmetry of that. The weight of being known by someone you did not know already met. Pruitt's face did something complicated. Several things at once, not all in the same direction. I didn't, he started. I know, Delia said. That's the point. She let that sit for a moment, not to be cruel. Because the point required space to be understood rather than just heard, and she had learned a long time ago that those were not the same thing. Heard passes through a person. Understood stays. She looked at him steadily. You walked into that training and made a decision before the first hour was finished. A decision about what applied to you and what didn't. About who had something to teach you and who didn't. She paused. And today you walked into this store and made the same decision in about 30 seconds. About my daughter. About what was worth listening to and what wasn't. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. That's not 26 years of good judgment. That's 26 years of the same judgment. Repeated. Pruitt stood very still. The room stood very still with him, and from across the store, near the entrance to the back stockroom, Wade Pruitt stepped out from behind the counter. He did not rush. He walked at the pace of someone who has made a decision and is honoring it with the steadiness the decision deserves. He crossed the floor, stopped near his father. Not between them. Not positioning himself as a barrier or a mediator or anything that would make him the center of something that was not about him. Just beside him, the way a person stands when they want to be present for something without controlling it. Pruitt looked at his son. Wade looked back. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The look contained what the message had contained an hour ago. Not accusation, not performance of disappointment, but something quieter and in some ways harder to receive than either of those things. The look of someone who has been watching and has understood what they were watching, and is now simply present with what that means, without trying to resolve it faster than it can resolve. Pruitt looked at his son's face for a long moment, then at the floor, then back up, and the thing that had been holding his posture in place for the last hour. The professional certainty, the practiced authority, the 26 years of being the person in the room whose version of events was the version that stood, went somewhere, not dramatically, not with any visible collapse. It just went, left him standing there as a man rather than a position, as a person rather than a rank. He looked up. He turned to Simone. She did not make it easy. She did not rearrange her face into something that would help him get through the moment faster or feel less of what the moment required him to feel. She stood where she had been standing for the better part of an hour, bags in her hand, back straight, eyes carrying everything the last 60 minutes had cost. And she waited. "Simone," he said, his voice in a different register. The one that remained when everything performative had been stripped away and what was left was just a man standing in a sporting goods store at noon on a Tuesday, accounting for himself. "I was wrong," each word arriving separately, not pushed along by the momentum of the others, not rushing to get past the discomfort of saying them. "What I said to you, the way I said it, in front of everyone here." He did not look at the crowd when he said everyone. He kept his eyes on her specifically. "I was wrong. And I'm sorry." Simone held his gaze. She let the words settle into the room rather than rushing past them. Let them carry the weight they had earned, rather than lifting it away to make the moment easier for either of them. She thought about the last hour, about standing here when every reasonable instinct told her to leave, about the inventory, shoulders, jaw, hands, running on a loop, while Pruitt's voice pressed in from every direction, and the crowd watched and nobody moved, and the silence after each thing he said felt like a vote for his version of reality. She thought about the bag she had not put down once. She thought about her mother walking through those doors. Then she said, "I know you are. Not forgiveness in the complete sense. Not absolution. Not the warm resolution that wants to wrap everything up and leave everyone feeling clean. Just acknowledgement, the clear-eyed receipt of something that had been owed and was now paid and could be filed in the appropriate place." Pruitt nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more, had several more things assembled and ready. But he seemed to arrive at the understanding, watching her face, reading what was actually there, that more words right now would be for his own comfort and not for anything she needed. That the least he could do, after an hour of making everything about his own certainty, was to let this one moment be about what she needed, which was for it to be finished. So he stopped and let it be finished, and the room breathed. Delia turned, not theatrically, not with the gesture of someone who has been waiting for a stage or building toward a speech. Just the natural movement of a person who has something to say and is saying it to everyone present, because everyone present is the reason it needs to be said. "My daughter stood in this store for an hour," she said. "She didn't have paperwork. She didn't have documentation in a format you would accept. She had what she knew, and she held on to it while someone with a badge and decades of institutional weight told her it wasn't real." She paused, not for effect, to be precise about what came next. She didn't leave. She didn't agree to a version of events that was wrong, just because agreeing would have made it stop. She stayed, and she kept telling the truth. The woman with the clearance basket was not moving. The couple near the shoe salt had come back to where they had been standing before, but different, quieter, listening with the specific attention of people who understand they are insides, something that will stay with them past today. Gary Sutton, near the far wall, had his notebook out, the small paper kind, writing in it with a pen. Not the footage, something else, something he wanted to keep in a different way. People talk about courage like it's the absence of doubt, Delia continued. Like it's confidence, certainty, knowing before you start that you're going to be believed. She looked at her daughter. That's not what it is. What it is, what she showed today, is doing it while you're uncertain, while nobody in the room believes you, while the audience has already made its decision and is waiting to see how long you take to make the same one. She looked at the room, at all of it. That's not a small thing. That's the hardest version of the thing. And she did it alone, without asking anyone for anything except to be listened to. Renee, who had been holding herself together with visible effort since the first minute of all of this, made a sound that was not a word, but carried the weight of several sentences, and did not require translation. Roy looked at the ceiling briefly, the gesture of a person managing their own response to something landing harder than anticipated. Wade had his hand over his mouth. Pruitt was looking at the floor. Gary Sutton stepped forward, carefully, the measured step of a reporter who understands the difference between witnessing a moment and inserting himself into it. He introduced himself. Name, station, the fact that he had been here since before it started and that the footage had been online for over an hour. It's been shared more than 60,000 times, he said, plainly. Not as leverage, as information. The affiliate has already called. I wanted you to know that before I asked if you'd like to make a statement. He looked at Delia. She considered him with the same unhurried assessment she applied to everything. Then she shook her head. No. Gary nodded. No pressure applied. Delia turned back toward Simone, and she said, at a volume that was not performing for anyone, but was simply the volume at which a person speaks when they mean what they are saying and want it heard clearly. The story is her, not me. 3 words for Gary, 3 words for everyone still in the room, and 3 words, most importantly, for Simone, who stood still and received them and felt something shift in her chest that had nothing to do with the crowd and everything to do with 24 years of being this woman's daughter and knowing, in the specific way you know things that were given to you before you had language for them. That this was true. Gary closed his notebook. Did not use the footage of those words. Did not quote them in the post he would update in the next hour. Wrote them in ink. Kept them in the way that means something was worth keeping differently. Brenda Holt approached from the direction of the register. She moved with the energy of a woman who is aware she did not conduct herself well today and is navigating what comes after that awareness without any script for it. She stopped a respectful distance from Delia, looked at her, then at Simone. I should have stepped in earlier, she said. I'm sorry I didn't. Simone looked at her. She thought about what the right answer was. Whether generous and honest were different things in this particular case. She decided they were not entirely different, and chose the version that was both without being more than both. I appreciate that, she said, which was true, and which was all she had. Brenda nodded, went back to her counter, straightened things that did not need straightening. The small physical occupations of a person who needs something to do with her hands while she processes. Roy moved first among the people who had been at the center of it. He walked to Delia, stopped at the distance of 2 people who know each other well and have known each other well for long enough that proximity is not required to communicate what they mean. You came fast, he said. I was already in the car, she said. He looked at her, something passing between them that had no shortcut. She did good. Delia looked at Simone, I know. Roy looked at Simone too, not with the warmth of someone offering comfort, with the plainness of someone stating an observed fact. You held, he said. Thank you, Simone said. For standing up. He shook his head slightly. You were already standing. I just said what needed to be said out loud. He said goodbye to Delia with the nod that functioned between them, as everything a longer farewell would have been. Picked up his coffee cup from the cafe counter, found it cold. Set it back down, zipped his jacket, walked out of the store the way he had entered it. Without announcement, without ceremony, the way people leave when they have done what they came to do, and have no need for acknowledgement of the doing. The store had been returning to itself for the last several minutes. The couple near the shoe wall finishing the conversation that had been interrupted. The woman with the clearance basket moving toward the register. The music overhead becoming audible again, now that the floor no longer demanded everyone's full attention. Wade was back behind his counter. Pruitt was still near the hoodie rack. He had not left. Simone was aware of it the way she had been aware of his presence for the entire hour, a located weight in the room, impossible to fully ignore. But he was not performing anything now, not positioning himself, not managing the space around him the way he had been managing it since the moment he first laughed. He was just standing there, looking at Wade, at the back of his son's head visible over the counter, as Wade processed the transaction he had abandoned an hour ago. Looking at his son with the expression of a man doing a kind of math that does not involve numbers and does not resolve quickly and cannot be checked for accuracy until much later. Simone watched him for a moment, then looked away. She had what she came for. Both things, the gear in the bag and the thing that could not go in any bag. The thing that had always been there, and had been confirmed today in the only way things like that ever get confirmed, which is by being tested in front of people who expected it to break, and watching it not break. Delia came to stand beside her, just the two of them for a moment, the room continuing its return to ordinary around their edges. Delia looked at her daughter's face. Read it the way she had been reading it for 24 years. You all right, she said. Not quite a question. An invitation to say the accurate thing rather than the convenient one. Simone considered it honestly. Getting there, she said. Delia nodded. That was the right answer. The honest one, which was the only kind that counted between them. You held your word the entire time, Delia said. In a room where breaking it would have made everything easier and faster and less costly to stand through. You kept it. You didn't detail what I asked you to keep private. You didn't use what you knew as a weapon, even when a weapon was exactly what the situation seemed to require. She looked at her daughter. That's harder than it sounds, holding two things at once without dropping either one. Most people drop something. Simone looked at her. You didn't, Delia said. Something arrived in Simone's chest. The full weight of the hour. All of it. Every minute of it. The lights and the voice and the crowd and the empty search words result in the specific particular feeling of standing in a room that had decided something about her and being unable to change its mind through any means she was permitted to use. It arrived all at once and her chest tightened with the mass of it, and for a moment she thought she might cry. She did not. She breathed her mother's inventory, the one that had been running in her own body for so long it had stopped being her mother's and started being hers. I almost left, Simone said. Twice. I know, Delia said. I really wanted to. I know that too. Delia looked at her, wanting to leave and staying anyway. That is the entire thing, every time. In every room. That is all it ever is. Simone held that. Let it settle into the place where things settle when they are true. Was it worth it? She said finally. The Carter family audit. The question her mother had asked after every hard thing for as long as Simone could remember. Delia looked at the room, at the space that had been a store this morning and was now also something else. A room where something had been tested and where the result of the test was now part of what the room contained, whether anyone who had been inside it today acknowledged that or not. Yes. For a few reasons. Simone waited. Because you did it right, Delia said. Not loudly. Not in a way that made you the problem. You stayed true to what you knew without making it a performance. And because people were here watching. And what they watched was someone stay true when staying true was the most expensive available option. She paused. That's not nothing. That's something they're going to carry home today. Some of them will know why. Some of them won't, but they'll carry it. Renee appeared beside them. She looked at Delia, then at Simone, then at the bags, then back at both of them, with the expression of a person who has been patient for a very long time and has more than earned the right to be slightly less patient now. Are we done? Because I have been standing on this floor for over an hour in completely the wrong shoes for whatever today decided to become. Simone laughed. A real one. Short and unexpected and catching her slightly off guard and feeling, in the way that laughter feels after something difficult has finally passed through you, like a release of something she had not fully known she was still holding. Delia looked at Renee. The assessing look, warmer than its usual form. You stayed the whole time. Obviously, Renee said. Delia held her gaze for a moment. Thank you, she said. Renee nodded once. The nod of someone who does not need elaboration and would prefer none. They moved toward the exit, not rushing. The pace of three people who have been through something together and are allowing it to finish at its own speed rather than trying to outrun the end of it. Near the door, Simone looked back. The store had resumed, fully. The couple near the shoe wall had made their selection. Brenda at her register, processing something, her shoulders carrying the particular set of a person who is going to be thinking about today for a while. The music audible again. Wade behind his counter. Pruitt still near the hoodie rack, still looking at his son. His face had lost the shape it wore for the last hour. What was left looked more like the actual face underneath all of it, less certain, less managed, more honest, which made it harder to look at and also more real. He did not look at Simone when she looked back. She did not need him to. She turned and walked through the sliding glass doors, the parking lot, the November air, the ordinary motion of a Tuesday afternoon in Charlotte that did not know or care what had happened inside that store and was simply going about itself, as ordinary things do. They found Delia's car. Renee hugged Simone, long and firm and real. The hug of a person who has been wanting to do it for an hour and is doing it properly now that she can. Then she nodded at Delia, the compressed version of everything she did not say. Delia nodded back with the same compression. Renee walked toward the train. Simone and Delia stood beside the car. I need to get back, Delia said. Debrief this afternoon. I know. You'll be okay. Not a question. Yes, Simone said. Delia opened the door. Set the bag on the back seat with the attention of someone who knows exactly what it contains. Then she stood with her hand on the roof of the car and looked at her daughter. Simone, yeah, every room you walk into from here, Delia said. Every room that tries to tell you that what you know isn't real. Every person who laughs at the thing you're certain of. She held her daughter's gaze. You already know what to do. You showed yourself today. You don't need me to tell you. Simone looked at her mother, at the uniform, at the 26 years in the set of her shoulders and the precision of everything. And underneath all of it, through all of it, the way a note runs through everything that is tuned to hear it, just Delia, who made eggs in a specific way and called every Sunday and whose hand on your shoulder was the exact weight of being completely known. I love you, Simone said. Delia looked at her. Said nothing for a moment. Then, the Carter way, not the absence of it. The feeling too large for the ordinary phrase. So the phrase becomes something else. Something permanent. I know, which meant I have always known and I will always know, and that is not going anywhere regardless of how long I am gone or how far. Delia got in the car. Simone stood in the parking lot and watched until the car was out of the lot and into the street and gone. Inside the store, in the quiet that had settled over the floor, now that everything that needed to happen had happened, Wade Pruitt finished the last of his closing tasks. His father was still there, still in the approximate vicinity of the hoodie rack, not buying anything, not on his phone, just standing with the stillness that had settled into him sometime in the last 40 minutes and had not yet found its resolution. Wade came around the counter, stood near his father. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The store moving around them the way the world moves around things it does not know how to categorize. Then his father said, You texted Roy. Yes. How long have you had his number? 2 years. From the veterans event. Pruitt was quiet for a moment. You never mentioned it. No, Wade said. I didn't. Another silence. Why not? Pruitt said. Wade thought about it, the honest version, the one that was true and also possible to say out loud to his father in a sporting goods store at noon on a Tuesday. Because I didn't think you'd understand why I wanted to know people like him, he said. People who did what they did and then came back and just lived, sat in cafes, drank, coffee, were quiet about all of it. He looked at his father. I wanted to understand how someone carries that much and still knows how to be still. Pruitt looked at him, his son, 21 years old, standing here in a store apron with his shift over and his hands at his sides, and saying things that were true without softening them first. You didn't do that today, Wade said, not accusing, just saying the thing that was true. You were the opposite of still. Pruitt looked at the floor, then back up. No, he said, I wasn't. 3 words with nothing added to make them lighter. The same plainness Delia had asked of him, and that he had finally found. Wade held his father's gaze. He did not say it was okay. He did not know if it was okay, and he was 21 years old, and he had learned something today. Watching Simone stand in the middle of this floor for an hour and refuse to agree to something false because agreement would have been easier. About the cost of saying things that are not true in order to make a moment more comfortable. He was not going to pay that cost today. Okay, he said instead. The beginning of something, not the end of something. The beginning of a conversation that would take longer than a parking lot and a Tuesday afternoon to have. The kind that requires a lot of starting and a lot of arriving at things that are difficult to say out loud, and then saying them anyway, and figuring out what comes after the saying. But a beginning. That was enough for today. Pruitt nodded. They walked out together into the afternoon, the badge on his belt no longer catching any light that anyone needed to note, and the space between them, not large, not small, but honest, is exactly what it was. Simone got home at 1:15. She sat on the couch and did not turn on anything, did not open her phone, did not call anyone. Sat in the quiet of her own apartment and let the morning finish, settling in her body, the way mornings do when you have been holding them at a distance and finally allow them in. She thought about the store, the lights, Pruitt's voice pressing in from every direction, the woman with the clearance basket who said nothing, the men near the register who said nothing, the feeling of standing in a room full of people and understanding that none of them were going to move. She thought about Roy getting up from his stool, slow, leaving his coffee, walking over, saying plainly the thing that needed to be said. She thought about Wade behind the counter with his hands pressed flat to stop them shaking. She thought about Renee standing beside her without a word, just there the whole time. She thought about her mother walking through those doors, not hurrying, just arriving. The way Delia arrived at everything that mattered, wanting to leave and staying anyway. That is the entire thing. Simone sat with that, let the afternoon be what it was. Outside, Charlotte went on. Traffic, a neighbor's television. Someone in the parking lot below in a conversation she could hear the shape of, but not the words. Normal. The world being normal. Not knowing and not needing to know what happened inside that store this morning. She looked at her hands in her lap, thought about the bag she had held the entire time without knowing that was what she was doing. Holding something that belonged to her mother in a room that did not believe her mother was who she was. She had known what was true, and she had stayed. That was the thing Delia could not carry through the sliding glass doors and hand to her. Could only arrive and confirm was already there. Had been there the whole time, would be there the next time a room tried to tell her that what she knew was not real. It had been there. It was still there. Simone closed her eyes, breathed, and let it be enough.